welcome to a special episode of Nintendo Voice. This is Twisted Talk, a small series of podcasts where me, Lewis Pugh, developer of Twisted Fusion, will be talking with somebody else about the game and just hopefully generating some interesting talk. And today I have Ian Hannam with myself.
Hello!
And to give ourselves a quick intro, Ian has been a friend of mine for quite some time. And in addition to that, he has helped out with the game's development in some key areas.
So yeah, Lewis and I have been friends for many years now. We actually met at play school. And we sort of didn't see each other for a while, came back and got into all things gaming, and as part of that, creating games as well. So it's been really exciting to see Lewis's journey on this. And yeah, my kind of role within Twisted Fusion, we've done a fair bit of play testing together and also doing some work on the script.
Exactly, and both of those areas we will go into in more detail later on. But again, just to keep this little intro going, as you mentioned, this is not the first project we've worked together on.
No, not by a long shot. No.
Exactly, yeah, and I mean, that's not common knowledge, so it's worth talking about. And so, we've been, making games together for all, I don't know, would you be able to put a figure on that? How many years?
I'm imagining we started around the kind of 10, 11 mark, so we're looking at certainly over 15, 16 years. Yeah, so a long, long time.
Exactly, yeah, it's scary when you think about it. But yeah, we've been making games together for a certain amount of time, and there's been common themes of what these games have been. They're usually some sort of 2D platformer. They're not always. Sometimes they're RPGs, or, monster raisers, potentially. Monster battlers?
Yeah, I mean, just trying to think back at some of the more memorable projects. I mean, this is probably one of the first ones that actually has been completed.
It's part of a small group of games which have been completed. Yeah.
I mean, one of my early ones that I finished was an epic platformer, based off of Jigglypuff, and it was called Jigglypuff's Big Adventure. So yeah, through that game you were jumping around, avoiding spikes and battling Beedrills. So that was a classic. We also had some racing games, and actually some of the characters from Twisted Fusion have been there for a long time. So for anyone who's seen the Go-Go characters throughout the game, they have appeared in many of our kind of early attempts at game making.
Yeah, Go-Go was basically he was kind of shared. He was like my creation, but he was like a shared mascot.
He's kind of our Mario, isn't he?
Yeah. and I mean, that's kind of, at least from my perspective, transformed to Korra. Just because, she has, well, I guess it's arguable, but I was about to say she has a bit more personality. She's a bit more of an actual character. But, Go-Go has stayed true, as it were. He has a decent role in this game, in Twisted Fusion. I mean, there's a lot of Go-Go's there. For one, there's a lot more Go-Go's than there are Korras.
Absolutely, yeah. And hopefully, as you go through, you'll get to speak to some of the Go-Go's, and you'll see that they've actually got some quite, hopefully, funny things to say.
So yeah, this is a perfect segue, so thank you very much.
Oh, that's all right.
Moving from our intro into the talking of the game, the script, the different characters, and our roles in all of that. And so my areas have been the general design of kind of everything of the game, and the developer, the coder. They're my key areas in terms of, the art of the game, the music of the game. They are all done by different people. And Ian here helped tremendously in the final script. And so I wrote the original script, and it was quite different to what you will read in the final game. And that is thanks to Ian. And so, just want to talk now on I want to ask you some questions, Ian.
Of course, yeah.
So, what did you think of the original script I gave you?
Wow. So, it arrived in an email with a bit of a, what can you do with this, in X number of weeks. Because obviously, we had a little bit of a deadline we were working to get this kind of game all together. And yeah, my initial thoughts were, okay, yeah, fine. We're going to need a lot of work here. It was kind of very bare bones. Pretty much characters just stating
was it very
facts.
functional?
It was, yeah. It basically told you the basic facts and nothing more. Didn't expand too much, but yeah, I think obviously Lewis had used this script to kind of get you through the game, and that's kind of what its purpose was early on, really, wasn't it? The kind of characters pointing you in the right directions, giving you the things, but there was the kind of no additional information, no kind of extra facts and things like that. So yeah, that was kind of where I stepped in, and hopefully I've managed to kind of lift these characters a little bit and give them a bit of personality and maybe a bit more backstory and a few funny comments as well. So
yeah, I think a good thing to jump onto now is the character of the Go-Go's, because before they didn't really. I'm trying to racking my brain here. I don't think they had a consistent vibe around them. I can't even really remember what the Go-Go's originally said.
No, they were quite sort of, oh, thank you for rescuing me, and, that's about it.
Yeah. I think I may have come up with the idea of, they can break the fourth wall, as in, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I think I came up with the line, they can see things others can't, and they
a special sight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the special sight was a useful thing to explain some bits of the game which just don't make sense, as in explaining the different apps and so on.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and even the kind of the monster system that goes along with that. You've got those Go-Go's in the village which give you some information about the different types of monsters and things that maybe other characters wouldn't really be able to convey.
Exactly, yeah. And I feel that you took that particular behaviour of them and you kind of made it a bit more of a personality thing, and so they're a bit cheekier as well because they can see things as well, and they've got a much more funnier vibe than the characters I wrote originally.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of just completely daft puns.
Yes.
So I saw these guys as a kind of comic relief element. As designed characters, they're not particularly serious. They're kind of an eyeball with kind of cartoony feet or hands. The debate goes on. So I thought, out of anyone, these guys can kind of deliver some funny lines, be a bit cheeky. They're not human, so they can get away with a little bit more. So yeah, I really enjoyed writing the lines for these guys, actually.
That's awesome, man. So another question I have for yourself, and it's kind of putting you on the spot. I don't apologise for that, though, unfortunately.
That's all right. So I think quick on my feet.
What was the favourite character in terms of the writing that you felt was in the game after you've done it?
Yeah, I think there's probably two. There's Trails, who is a character who pops up outside dungeons and gives you a little bit of information and kind of points you in the right direction a little bit. So I quite enjoyed writing him because he's kind of referencing things that are kind of really going on in the game. He's kind of conveying some useful information, but also you're trying to blend that with a bit of personality as well. And I think the same goes for, and you might have to just tell me the name here quickly, Miko, is it?
It is, yeah.
Okay, well done. Thanks. Miko, who kind of acts as your kind of tour guide, and again kind of explains a little bit about the places, because I think for me that kind of really helped with the kind of world building of Evan, which is obviously the land you're kind of stuck in. So those two in particular, and I think probably the biggest challenge that kind of went along with them is they're characters that are kind of cropping up again and again and again. But where it is such a kind of open world game that you can do in any order, they weren't talking to you in a particular sequence. So you couldn't write it as a kind of character developing relationship, because for all you know, this is the first time the player's talking to the character, even though it might be in a really obscure place. So I found that quite interesting, trying to kind of make it so each time you talk to them could still be the first time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there is an introduction, certainly for Miko, where she does explain, where she stood right at the beginning of when you get to Evan.
Yeah,
so there's
just
the kind of first
footsteps away, really. I mean, it's hard to avoid, but the player could.
Exactly, yeah. So there's always that challenge. So she still has to talk to you very much in the way that it could be the first time you're seeing her. So, yeah, I enjoyed that element, and I think there was a few times when I'd sort of sent the script to Lewis, and he'd said, "Actually, bear this in mind. you can't kind of have that continuity. So I did have to go back a few times and look at how to get that across, really.
Yeah, and I think the same challenge was with the Go-Go characters as well.
Absolutely, again, because there's so many of them, they crop up in so many different places. You can talk to them in whatever order that you happen to find them in.
Yeah.
So yeah, exactly the same thing again, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just an element of, it's not even so much as, oh, the player might stumble upon them in a different order. They might, have, played through half the game not talking to a single person, and then suddenly decide they want to start talking to people. Like, they could completely just change their play behaviour, and the game needs to handle that as well. But it's interesting how you've chosen, the two most chattiest characters in the game as your favourite. So they're the ones that you've probably wrote the most amount of text for.
I think, yeah, I suppose in a way I kind of got to know them and kind of gave them the kind of little idioms and, little things that they will say or ways in which they'll behave. And I suppose, yeah, that was quite exciting for me to get to know them and kind of put more of my stamp onto them and how they speak.
Yeah. All right, that's cool. And I think potentially the final bit of character talkings is the fact that you can change your playable character. Obviously, it can be multiplayer as well, and you can have different characters. And sometimes, in conversation, your characters aren't mute like in a lot of other games, so they do say things. And so, was that a challenge? The fact that there was this different cast of characters who basically had to say the same thing.
Absolutely, and yeah, and be talked to by a character as well. So, there's the challenge if you can't use the kind of he, she, it, because you've obviously got. Well, I don't know if I should say this yet, but you can actually unlock Go-Go as a character later in the game.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
So again, that's a whole other element. He's not even a human character. So from that kind of perspective, you have to write the player character's lines in a fairly generic way, but I kind of wanted to go for quite a cynical character. So I think a lot of the time the character questions what's going on and, why am I having to collect more of this stuff? And things that as a player you might actually be feeling, but it's kind of poking fun at it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, really, because as the player, I feel sometimes that text really is what you're thinking, especially when it is a game where sometimes it deliberately plays on tropes of the genres it's in, and so it's really nice then for the character of Korra or whoever it is to be backing your side and saying surely I don't have to do another one of these. And it was all intentional.
Yeah, I think that's what you've kind of got to do when you've got to go generic. You've got to try and tap into your player, really, haven't you?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I think it's really well done. Well, I may be biased, but I'm very pleased how it came out. So thank you very much.
Pleasure.
So the next thing I want to talk about is the testing of the game, and so this was another area you were very much involved with. I mean, this isn't a huge corporate organisation here. You may have assumed that it is not. It's a few people, really. Even technically, there is no company as such. So it's not even a body of people in that sense. But different people did come together to make this work. And because of the nature of the game, it is an open game. You can do things different orders. That means you do need to do a lot of testing.
Yeah, boy, have I played this game a lot.
Yeah, we've all played this game loads, inside and out. And even then, there's different. We can't have done the game in every combination and every different weird facet, and so it's a tricky game to play test as well. Just the number of options is mind-boggling, and I don't even necessarily mean that in a good way. I just as a tester, it's such an arduous task. Like the fact that you can play the game up to 5 people at any time, and when you combine that with things like, the actual key tasks of the game, like the towers can be done in any order. There are also quests which you could have activated at the same time. There's different characters you could be, or different combinations of different abilities you could be having, or different players could be using. And you've got your special character traits as well. there's just a lot of different stuff, and that's what makes testing the game tricky. And there's no real easy solution to that. It's kind of just putting in, clocking in your hours.
Yeah, it definitely kind of links back to what we were saying about the characters, really. I mean, you as a designer have had to think, okay, well, even from the initial kind of when you get to Evan, the tutorial kind of in our world is very much set. But once you get to Evan, straight away you've got a choice, left or right. I mean, as silly as that sounds, that's huge. I mean, that opens up two massive branches of ways you could go. And then by going left or right, then obviously that kind of goes even further. Do I go up left or down left?
Yeah, and I'd say even on, just before that, it's like you can see two people. Do I speak to either of them? All of them, or do I just run by them? And the game kind of has to be appreciative of any of those decisions.
Absolutely, yeah. It's got to be accessible, hasn't it? And sort of, yeah, you've kind of stuck in that. It's got to be really open, but there's got to be some help along the way. So trying to find that balance is quite an interesting one.
And to be fair, I mean, that's kind of a lot of what happens in testing as well, because it's not so much I locked in my room, I make a game, I come out, let's test this thing and fix the bugs. It doesn't really work like that. So the game is changing constantly as we're doing the testing, and some of that is reflected is in response to what happens during the testing.
Yeah, I mean, I think we found as well, we definitely tried to test little areas in a vacuum almost. Okay, let's get together and let's play through this tower. And fine, that all works, and so on. And maybe we'll try another tower next week. But then I think it was quite interesting. I was playing this recently with Lewis, and just being able to walk around and do things. He actually commented how at one point he obviously heavily tested the tower so much that maybe the kind of inconsequential things that do pop up in the game, that's a whole nother layer of testing that maybe he hadn't thought of doing straight away, but is equally important because, like we said, players can do this in any order and in any way they like. They might not even go for the tower quest straight away.
So that was the other element. I mean, especially to the late stages of development, I had muscle memory is not the phrase, but I could speed run this game in a very particular order. But by doing so, I'm actually missing out on a big chunk of the game. But I'm hitting all the key critical points
as you see them.
Well, as in to functionally get to the credits.
Yeah.
There's certain things you have to do. You don't have to do them in this particular order, but I believe it's the fastest way. But there's a bunch of the overworld you don't have to go to. There's most of the characters you don't have to speak to. I mean, none of the the characters you have to manually speak to. I mean, there's some pop up in cutscenes. But by doing so, and I keep doing this test as in to make sure everything works in the sense that all the towers work, all the story elements complete correctly. There's some bits I wasn't even testing at all. And then by doing some more casual play testing afterwards, I realised, I have missed out on a bunch of stuff. I need to, check this out more thoroughly. So I missed a few things near the end of the development, but thankfully I caught the bits I caught, at least I could. The real test will be soon.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning what a kind of frustrating process the kind of playtesting is, because I think sometimes, and certainly you found it's one step forward, two steps back. Sometimes you find a glitch, you fix it, but then that has an effect on something else. I remember there's this one point, I can't remember what it was you changed, but then suddenly none of the doors are working.
And it's just little things like that.
Little things that hinder your progress, like you can't move, or things like that. And it's such a long process. And I know, Lewis, you've been doing this for it feels like years.
It has been years, yeah.
You've had the core of the game ready for a long, long time. It's just been so much fine tuning and to get it to this point, hasn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, as you say, the game skeleton's kind of been there, or was there a while. But because of all the play testing which had to go through to make it a completable experience, like, things have been tweaked, things have been added. Well, lots of things have been added, really, during that process. But it also comes to the subject of the game's balance. And a lot of that is kind of just handed to the players in the terms of, oh, there's a difficulty slider for you. You know, you can move it around. If you're finding it too easy, put it up, you get more rewards. Put it back down if you're finding it's too tough. And that also goes with, like, the game's economy scale in terms of you get more money if you raise difficulty. So in the terms of, like, is the player getting enough money, or, you know, are they getting too much money as they play through the game in order to unlock things to, you know, make sure they haven't got all the items, you know, by the time they're on the second tower or something. And that took a lot of testing as well. So it's just getting all those different elements right, and I think we got a good balance by the end of it. But thankfully, there's also, you know, kind of giving players the tools to tweak it themselves to their own preference probably is going to help here as well.
Absolutely. Now, I know you've had a fair number of kind of beta testers as part of the Kickstarter, and I know they've had some pretty valuable input, haven't they?
They definitely have, but that was also a tricky one, because, like, the beta test, the official beta testing, was done on the PC. And that was ever so slightly different. It ran on the same core, but because of the nature of it running on a PC, it did run slightly differently. So it wasn't 100% reliable, but it was absolutely tremendously helpful still, because there was just a lot of people playing it, and a lot of people just giving their input and trying different things, which is what really helps, because if you get a lot of people playing a game like this, they will tackle things in different orders. Whereas if you just have, like, a couple of playtesters and a lot of time, they still may not do all the different variations, just because their minds may not be geared that way. And so, yeah, it was really good having lots of just different people around the world playing this and giving all sorts of different feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we probably did fall into that trap a little bit of playing it in a vacuum. So, you know, you tested certain things, but when I played it recently as a whole game, I played it completely differently. I've just been enjoying walking around the overworld and kind of getting experience and getting coins and doing all that stuff, which maybe when we were doing testing, we didn't necessarily have the time for as much, because we had key things we wanted to hit. So definitely great to have a whole team of people that can approach it from different angle and kind of see what they enjoy and what seems kind of right. And yeah, brilliant.
So yeah, I see this as, like, both good points and bad point. Is that I kind of, like, and I don't mean this in a dark looming way, but at some point during development, I was like, if I wish I'd kind of made this like a traditional level based game, like with, you know, predefined stages. It would be so much easier to develop. It would be so much easier to test if I could just, like, literally take them out in different chunks and they didn't affect each other. But yeah, all these different things happening at the same time, it was a huge challenge, and it was probably one of the biggest reasons the game kind of was delayed for as long as it was. It was me misunderstanding how long that process would take, because I am more used to making more linear games, and I thought, you know, I kind of just very statistically added all those elements together and go, okay, this project will take this amount of time. And I think I was like adding the time opposed to where I should have been multiplying it by the different amount of elements.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully you'll have the kind of perfect algorithm for the next one.
Yeah, maybe I could even sell that special calculator to other development teams and publishers.
Due out 2025.
That is the sad irony of that calculator project. Yeah. Okay, let's move on from testing to another area both of us had a lot of time with, which is the My Monsters section. And so this is an app in the game where you can raise a bunch of monsters. You can hatch them out of eggs, you can evolve them, you can fuse them with other monsters to make other bigger, better monsters, and you can pair them up in threes to fight in battle towers. So it's a completely optional mode where it for lovers of Pokemon and other monster battlers, it's for you. and it may be worth tinkering with if you haven't played those games. But yeah, it's this optional thing, which may seem odd, kind of lumped in with this platformer. But I think ultimately it kind of feels at home, and it adds a nice balance to. It gives a reason for defeating monsters and such in the game. It's a nice little game loop it has there. But what I wanted to talk about is because we were both involved, kind of its design and its evolution. So, Ian, how do you feel it's kind of all come together, the monster stuff in Twisted Fusion?
I think kind of going back to what we always made when we were younger in terms of games. Obviously, Pokemon has been a huge influence, and even Digimon as well.
Yeah,
which we were very much into, and even going far back as things like Tamagotchi, which is that kind of idea of kind of raising your virtual pet or your virtual monster, and then battling with it or doing something with it. So yeah, I think it's very much a kind of a culmination of all those things. It's a kind of a game we've always wanted to make. And so it's nice to have been able to include it in some way in this game. And I think as you're going through the game in Twisted Fusion, you'll find that, like Lewis said, you'll kill monsters, you'll collect coins, but you're also getting the resources as well. So I think by having the monster system, you're not necessarily adding anything extra on that the player has to do. But by doing the things you're normally doing anyway, you're going to benefit your My Monster team.
Yeah, it also breaks up the gameplay, as it were, and so it adds a bit more variety. So in addition, to the platforming and the shooting and the puzzle solving, to break that up, you can check out your monsters. You can maybe evolve some things, maybe send them off in a little battle, and I think it's like a nice justification of like the dual screen usage, because that's one of the things which you could genuinely multitask with, opposed to actually pause the game, and so you could have the view of your monsters on that second screen, and so you can see when you're fighting monsters normally in the game, you can see your monsters gain experience on the screen below without having to swap any menus. And so I think that's a nice use of it, like a nice thing you can point to and go, okay, so what's it doing with the two screens?
Yeah, I think actually as well, it's this whole app is really inspired by a real life journey we took. So many years ago, we had a bit of a road trip up to Scotland.
Yeah.
Which for us, kind of in the south of England, is we're talking like a 10-hour drive, really, aren't we? Or even more, depending on all the service station stops and fast food breaks.
Yes.
But before we went away, we decided we'd design an app which was very much in line with the kind of old Digimon we used to have in Tamagotchis, where you could raise some of these monsters. And actually, a lot of the designs of monsters in Twisted Fusion are from that game.
I was going to say, was this a smartphone app pre-iPhone?
It was, yeah.
Wow.
I think you somehow managed to go through a long process of loading it on, and
I think it was made in Java in the end.
It was impressive. I mean, it was pretty much a case of our friend Ben and I telling Lewis what we wanted, and he went and monkeyed around and eventually came back with this smartphone app. So it's kind of an in-game reflection of that journey, I suppose. And yeah, we had great fun with that whilst we were in Scotland. Kind of training up our monsters. It was frightfully unbalanced. But you could do some of those similar things like giving vitamins and things. And in Twisted Fusion, that's kind of reflected by boosting energy, by giving your monsters resources, and also the kind of gaining of experience and the fusing. And all of those things were kind of there in their infancy. But it was really nice in Twisted Fusion to see them kind of come together and have a solid engine, really.
Yeah. And a more modern, relatable example for others is Pokemon Go. Really, when you think about it, is because like this is a game which the main character has on their smartphone, and while they're running around in quotes the real world, their monsters are getting experience and so on. And so it's kind of a weird. I mean, unfortunately, I can't say it was inspired or it was like a parody of, because it was in development first. But it kind of is a parody of Pokemon Go, because it's the game within the game on a smartphone.
Absolutely. Or is Pokemon Go a parody of this, eh?
Yeah. Logically, that's the only conclusion.
Yeah, I think Niantic better get their checkbooks ready. No. Great fun having this though. And I just think it's a really cool function. And again, it's completely optional. But I think if you're someone like me that kind of enjoys collecting and having little side things to do, this is definitely for you. I mean, we were talking a little bit earlier, and we were talking about an old GameCube game, Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. I think it was on the Dreamcast as well, was it?
We were talking about our favourite game soundtracks, I believe. And
it just randomly came up. Yeah. And there's an element in that game called the Chow Garden, where you're going through your game, and as you beat enemies, you're collecting these little kind of tubes or vials of strange liquids and things.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of feeding them to your chows in the kind of side bit, and then they're growing in certain ways, and you can level them up and give them different looks and things. So very much took a bit of inspiration from that, really. And again, it's just something really laid back, something you can do as you're playing the main game. You might even go through the whole game not having looked at it, and then you can go back to it and you'll see that, okay, actually I've been collecting all these eggs as I've been going. Now I can kind of really get into them. I've got loads of resources, so I can hatch them, I can train them up a bit, and it doesn't really matter when you hop into it, you'll still be able to kind of get some use out of it.
Yeah, I was actually just going to mention it's a good post-game feature, because I like games which don't really end when it ends. Because, especially for games you actually do get to completion, it's probably a game you quite like. And so by the time the credits roll, you're probably quite sad that it has ended. And so I like games which give you opportunities, at least. Don't force you to. But if you still want to play a bit more, you can. You can still progress in something. And so this is a good way to do that. So, yeah, if you had completed the game, you can still carry on raising monsters. And it's a good excuse to raise that difficulty slider, to raise the challenge. And you still have that nice game loop going. And so, yeah, there are some things in there to do once the game's done. And this is one of them. And yeah, I'm really happy how it came together.
Good, yeah. And I think as well, it's quite a mysterious app in the game. There isn't a lot of kind of instruction initially on what to do. So it's very much kind of aimed at a bit of self-discovery. But going back to some of those Go-Go characters, if you do happen to run into them, some of them will give you quite a bit of information about how you can train your monsters, the different types of monsters, the kind of resources you're collecting and what they like. So, yeah, there are hints in the game for you, but I think this should hopefully be very much one that people are talking about and kind of sharing their tips on. And, did you know if you fuse these two, you get this one? So, yes, I think it's purposely left quite open and to allow kind of discovery.
Yeah, it definitely is. Because, I mean, that's personally I find where the fun of these things come from, is discovering yourself what works and what doesn't. But you obviously can, and it's very popular today, to, if you just I want to find out what this information is, and hopefully that information, appears out there somehow in the internet. And I think Miiverse would be great for this, because, you press the home button and you can jump into the Miiverse community for it, and you can send and share your screenshots. You can ask questions straight away. You can look at what people are talking about. I'm kind of hoping the My Monsters app will take a fair amount of the discussion on the Miiverse community. That would be cool to see, and I can help out and so on. But I would really like to see this kind of kick off. But it's really hard. In a way, I kind of just need to sit back and see what happens. But yeah, it's interesting, really. I mean, I don't know what's going to come of it. It might be something which gets used a lot. It might be something which is not, or people just kind of discover things themselves and don't share it. I don't know how that part of the internet works. I really don't.
No, and I think that, there'll hopefully be an element of bragging almost, and check out all these awesome guys I've got, and you can ask me how I got them if you want, and I may or may not tell. But yeah, just all it will take is a few people to kind of really get on board with it, and kind of show off their teams of monsters, kind of show off their kind of completion of the different battle towers that are going on. And yeah, I think it could be something that just offers a different experience whilst you're still playing your kind of main game as well.
Yeah, and it's also, as we said before, it's that thing which you can go back to. Even if you completed the game long ago, there's still loads of secrets to find just in that My Monsters section by fusions and evolutions. And that keeps you playing, and hopefully that keeps the community going as well, and they can support the new people who jump in and, are completely lost in a particular tower because of its crazy design.
You've got him to blame for that.
Exactly, yeah. That's all me. You can just thank Ian, though, that it does functionally work. Through rigorous playtesting. Let's move on now, though, to a feature that Ian decided on, which is the exploration and secret finding of the game. And so, Ian, why? I mean, I gave you not a choice, but I let you come up with a particular feature to discuss, or about Twisted Fusion in general, and you come up with its exploration. So, how did you come to that decision?
Yeah, I think just kind of from playing the game from the off, you'll kind of notice quite early on that it is all about exploring, and kind of within the game, Lewis has kind of set a few different challenges in a way. There's lots of things that you can discover, so each screen of the kind of either overworld or tower, there are secrets within it. There's a go-go that's been captured by a slime somewhere that you've got to free. So if you're someone who enjoys kind of collecting things, then I think you're really going to enjoy this game, because how many is there in total? Something like 50?
I think there's 55 captured go-go's out there. So that's a nice round number, isn't it?
Yeah, 55. Easy to remember.
Yeah, especially while doing a podcast.
Absolutely. So 55 go-go's for you to go and find. There's also within the towers, there's secret keys that help you unlock kind of treasure. There's a number of different chests that you can find all around the world. So as well as that, there's also some hidden characters.
Yeah.
And these characters weren't actually scripted by me. They were by various people who pledged to the Kickstarter.
Oh, definitely, yeah. So there was various tiers, as there often is with these Kickstarter campaigns, and one of them, and I think it was relatively quite a low level, really, was to design your own NPC character, and they obviously came up with the design, and they got to do that in their own way by sending in a sketch, or in some cases even a photo, and in some other cases just purely a written description, whether large or small. And then after that, we worked together in a looser capacity on a script of what the character would say when you spoke to them. And this was all part of the script that I sent Ian on that fateful day, saying, what can you do with this?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really tinker too much with those, because I know that there was something that people had come up with themselves, and I kind of really wanted to respect that. So I think you'll find these characters are really kind of colourful, often a bit strange. They've got some odd things that they're going to tell you that you might think, oh, what is going on here? So if you do see some of those characters, it's probably that it's someone from the Kickstarter that has kind of written the script for them, put them in the game, and I think what they say may not initially make sense to you, but for them it's going to be a really special experience being able to show their friends, hey, look, this is my character hidden somewhere random in the ice ruins, and they're telling their backstory.
You're not thinking of anyone in particular there, are you?
There's a few I can think of.
Just that you mentioned you just mentioned the ice ruins, just instinctively,
Yeah. I'm thinking about a teddy bear and a sewing kit. Put it that way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's several characters. Then also there's pockets of kind of reality that you can go into that are hidden, which I won't say too much about. But you'll meet lots of these characters in there as well.
So yeah, it's a weird mixture, but I think the game setting is surprisingly acceptable of that. So they are out of place, but deliberately so, and it's in context for the story.
Oh yeah, I mean their whole backstory as well is similar to you, that they've been transported to Evan, so they are also kind of outsiders. So they're not going to sound like your average villager, or the person that's kind of lived there and knows all about Evan. They are going to sound a bit shocked and surprised, and so expect to see some really kind of quirky, interesting characters.
Yeah, and some people you'll discover have been transported, from other worlds entirely. Have ended up in the same situation as you, but have come from a very different background. And in that sense, I think it's really cool that, like, how it wasn't really designed as such, but the Kickstarter backer characters do add a nice extra layer to the story, where it's not just people from Earth involved in this, it's people from other worlds. But it does work with the story, so that's really cool.
Yeah, it's kind of just a really fun little Easter egg
Yeah.
that you'll run into every now and then as you're exploring. So lots to find when you're out exploring. Lots of kind of different people to talk to, and you can even kind of see in the kind of quest progress in the game sort of how you're getting on with all these various collectibles and side quests. So yeah, if you're someone that kind of likes to complete and likes to kind of feel the kind of reward of completing every single aspect of the game, then I think you're going to really like this and feel like you've got everything you can out of it.
So yeah, exploration is a huge part of this game, and you mentioned something there, which is there's the tasks app, and within it you get a breakdown of basically all the collectibles in the game, all the like the big story points are like check marked off, as well as all the quests, how long you've played the game, and so on. That's all detailed there, but that's a feature which actually didn't come until very very late in development. For the longest part, just wasn't in the game at all. I'm very glad that it is there now. But it's a funny reasoning that it appeared, which is basically one of the apps which had been there for quite a long time was the ability to change the wallpaper of your virtual smartphone. And it's a thing, but due to a technical reason, it used up a lot of memory, and it kind of had to go in the end. It was affecting performance. Basically, it was kind of nice, but it was very much a novelty feature. And so that went, and I had to find something to replace it with on on that virtual home screen. And it then dawned on me, it would make perfect sense to have a nice view of all the collectible, trackable things in the game. And it's weird how this game could have shipped without it, with all the things you can find in this game.
It's definite. I think it's needed, to be honest, and I think it's kind of a lucky happenstance that actually happened. Because I think it would be eating people up inside if they didn't know if they found all of these Go-Go's, or given some indication of kind of how close they are to completing the kind of various side bits. So yeah, I'm really glad actually that that unfortunate event for the wallpaper app did in fact benefit the game as a whole, I think.
Oh, definitely. It technically was like in theme of the fact like it's a game which doesn't hold your hand. It just lets you do your own thing, discover the game, both in terms of where things are, but in terms of what it actually is. But yeah, I do feel that task app. It just gives you something to kind of to ground yourself, really, like to gauge like how much of the game you're through to, and also it's a great post game thing, because most you are not going to complete this game without being completed. Maybe someone will surprise me and somehow manage to do that, but you're probably going to have so much of that still to do when the credits roll. And so that's a cool thing as well, just to be able to refer to and go, okay, there actually is a bunch of stuff here I could do if I wanted to.
Yeah, and I think it's great for kind of casual play as well. If you've got 20 minutes, half an hour that you're going to just pop on the game for a little bit, instead of kind of following the kind of main story arc, you might just feel like checking what you can get up to, and then kind of seeing if you can further your progress in one of those kind of collectibles or completion things. So I think it's just, it's great.
Cool. Okay, then. I think that's going to cover it, really. I mean, both for the exploration feature and this podcast itself. It was a mini podcast, which has kind of turned into more of a regular-sized podcast. So thank you for staying with us. So I guess to close this properly, I should do some sort of a official plug of this thing, even though it's all we've been talking about. So if you somehow managed to miss the key details, Twisted Fusion is coming out the 3rd of November as we speak. So if you're listening beyond that, obviously it's already out. That's for both the European and American eShops, everywhere but Japan, basically, which has an eShop. It's priced at $5, €5, or £4, or something which matches that in other currencies, which you. But yeah, please do check it out. There's screenshots and videos and such on the eShop, and there's lots of other things out on the internet. You can follow myself at Leuvsion, which is Leuvsion. And if you want to contact me, you can either do it via Twitter, I'm very active on there, or you can reach me on email, and that's Leuvsion, Leuvsion, at outlook.com. And how about yourself, Ian, if people want to get a hold of you?
Well, yeah, if you've enjoyed listening to our collective voices and you happen to be a fan of Pokemon, you might also want to get on Twitter and look up at Pokémon Voice, which is our joint podcast where we discuss all things Pokemon. If you'd like to talk to me personally, you can also look me up at Pokemon Ademo, which is at PKMN and then Ademo, ADEMO.
Okay, and with that does take us to the end of the show. So, thanks once again for listening, and this has been a special episode of Nintendo Voice. Goodbye.
Goodbye.